Boamah and Dogbe were the president's undoing. The president was virtually naked with the two around him. Well, this not coming from me, but according to a 64-page report of the NDC's Professor Butcher Committee, which was tasked to look into factors that led to the NDC's misfortunes in the 2016 presidential elections. Very revealing issues the committee has put together as reasons why President Mahama then could not retain his seat. Now, the report goes on to say that Dogbe, who we all know was the aide to the president, edited money meant for victims of the accident involving the presidential press corps from 50,000 cedis that was supposed to be given to them to 5,000, whilst others had 10,000 cedis out of that 50,000. These are very damning. They're damning enough to stimulate the NDC to put things in order, if not for anything, at least to increase the party's fortunes in the 2020 elections. On PM Express tonight, we'll be delving deep into the Professor Kwesi Butcher report and also gauge the mood of a political science analyst on the matter. This is PM Express. I will introduce my guest to you after the break. Welcome back to PM Express. We're discussing the 64-page Kwesi Butcher report, which is pointing fingers at Omane Boamah, former communication minister, and Dogbe for President Mahama's aid, President Mahama's aid as a reason for President Mahama's misfortunes. My name is Aisha Ibrahim. JoyNews editor Evans Mensah, who's been studying this report, is in the studio with me. We'll also be joined on Skype by Kobe Mensah, who is a political marketing expert. Evans, you're welcome on PM Express.
Thank you, Aisha.
First, let's look into the one that implicates these two people, Dr.Omane Boamah and Dogbe, and it says that, and words like the president was virtually naked, a very strong word.
The interesting thing about the report is that what we have is the executive summary, okay, and that is what is 65 pages, and it goes into some detail though about a lot of the things that the committee captured. In essence, in fact, if you really want to get a snapshot of what the committee did, how it did, what it found, what it recommended, the executive summary sums it all up for us, and it also details, and as you rightly noted, 65 pages capturing the executive summary and all the details that is in it. Now, you've isolated the controversial bit, and which is in essence the two personalities that were mentioned. Now, to put it in context, this aspect of the report, the committee itself made a point about this, and this was a collation of views. And the committee makes a point that these were views collected from, quote, a large segment of the pro-NDC press. Now, the committee notes, though, that it could not independently investigate and confirm all these claims, but they decided to capture it in the report, in their own words, so that the party will get a sense of what its own press allies thought of the campaign and John Mahama and some of the key individuals around him going forward.
Right.
And it's on that basis that they outline a few of the things. Now, they isolate the two names. I want to quickly go to some of the key things they said. For example, ill treatment of media. And it says no respect for the media. It goes to detail what it says. Presidential press corps was told, according to the report by Dogbe, that they were not part of the system, and the system then, in terms of the committee report, the structure that really made the party, the government tick, they were not part of it, according to the report, and that they were privileged to be party, to be part of the presidential press corps.
We had some of these allegations.
You know, exactly, some of these things that played out in the media quite strongly.
Right.
Again, the allegation was made that quarterly stipend meant for the presidential press corps were not disclosed until August 30, 2016, almost close to the elections. They didn't know about it, it was alleged. But this is the part that had taken a lot of people by surprise today, that only 4 out of the 34 members of the Presidential Press Corps were giving vehicles from a pool of about 200 that had been purchased for members of the press corps, for distribution to the members of the press corps and others.
Right.
So, for the first time we are hearing, according to this report, that apparently 200 vehicles had been bought for distribution to all members of the press corps, and there were, the report tells us, 34 of them. Only 4 of them got the vehicles. Now, then the questions are now being asked, if indeed these vehicles were bought and only 4 were distributed to the press corps, the remainder, who got them? And again, this sort of re-emphasizes the point that we had before the elections, that vehicles were given to celebrities.
Right.
I mean, some journalists got some of these vehicles. Of course, post the election, we've seen that, for example, the clear case of Mr. Dumelo has been an issue that played out in the media quite strongly. So, yeah. The vehicles were seized from him. Subsequently, he had to be chased to a particular garage. Right. So, again, this report was sort of re-emphasizing that point. But there was another aspect, and that's where Omane Boamah's name, the first time his name pops up, that Dr. Omane Boamah and Stan Dogbe, quote, were the president's undoing, the president, the report noted. It goes ahead to state that the president was virtually naked. And
those were very strong
with the two around him.
Exactly.
Now, the reason why this is important is it sort of comes on the back of what some leading figures of the party have publicly stated. Caridi, the current second deputy speaker of parliament, Abba Mbabe, had 2-3 years ago, way before the elections, I think, had made the point quite bitterly
that even him, the leading member of the party, had a difficulty meeting the president.
And he had used those same words. The president was naked. Yeah. And at that time,
well, I heard you speaking with Omane Boamah. You tried to get some answers on this, and he sought to deny it. No, but this report pointed clearly, even if we were to brush aside what the second deputy speaker had said, which we all heard, because it's no secret, he tried to say that, I mean, he didn't say that. But then the report, indeed, it says that it pointed in the last days of the 2016 elections, or in the last days of the 2016, the report, among other things, points to how the president even never had the opportunity to meet his own presidential
press corps. Yeah, I mean, that's another issue that was mentioned in there. That so in essence, the presidential press corps, and from what the report said, there were elements in there that were deemed to be pro-NDC. Right. Okay. So these were their complaints to the committee when they met them. Right. That they were ignored, in essence. That there was no meeting, that the president didn't see them. And in fact, if you see some of them, they're still very bitter about how the campaign was run.
I've had the opportunity to speak with some of them directly.
So these are things that you can confirm by speaking. Just last 2 weeks, in fact, I was talking to one member of the NDC. I mean, he owns a newspaper, etc., who was very bitter still about how he was ignored, and others were, in spite of the fact that they were propagating the party's message quite loudly. Right. And if you read the report, it says demand for gratuity was still pending. Okay. It had not been paid. Plus, John Mahama lost elections and not the NDC. And this is also very important. Okay. The fact that, remember when, after the election, John Mahama had said that he brought up the analogy of the jockey and the horse, and that if a jockey was riding a lame horse...
That was former President Rawlings.
No, that's John Mahama making that point, that it was essentially he as a jockey was riding a lame horse. Okay. Okay, and the criticism came that essentially he was deflecting responsibility. Okay. The report says, from the voices and the people they spoke to, that he lost elections and not the NDC. And that's not the horse, the jockey was responsible for the defeat. Another point that was made is that President ignored the Akuse strategy. And the party had gone to Akuse and met and strategized. And one of the key things that came out of the Akuse strategy was that the party was not going to run a flamboyant campaign. Okay. That they were going to run a campaign that was based on grassroots mobilization.
But if this the same report that says that monies that were meant for grassroots, it never got to them. But I think we should listen to Dr. Omane Boamah's response to some of these issues raised in the Kwesi Botwe report.
Let me take it from a decision that has been taken recently, and I'm sure it is in the public domain. That decision states that we are doing away with the biometric registration system as a party. What has that got to do with Dr. Omane Boamah? Again, if anybody says, and this is not to say that that is what the report said, but since this is what you are discussing, I'm responding to it, that Mr. Dogbe and I made the president believe that he was more popular than the party. Where is that proof? Where is that proof? Again, let me add, even though I was the Minister for Communications in charge of government information, as a true party man, I made sure that there was a platform called the National Communications Hierarchy, which had the National Communications Officer, his deputies, the regional communication officers of all the 10 regions, and every information that we released to the public, we made a special case to put it also on that platform with a view that it will also percolate down to the grassroots. And so all I'm saying is, but for the fact that you are discussing it, I will not have responded. That is not also to say that this is the official report of the party. But I'm basically giving these responses as crisp as they are to demonstrate that the content of what you are reading can at best be treated as dust on the shoes of a schoolboy who has closed from school and has gone to play on a football pitch that has no grass.
So, Dr. Omane Boamah, one of the parts that the report captures, and the reason why that has become an issue, is where it says that Dr. Omane Boamah and Mrs. Dogbe were the president's undoing, that the president was virtually naked with a two around him. This is a view that we know publicly had been expressed by leading members of the party, including the current second Deputy Speaker of Parliament, who had publicly made that point already, and it's found its way into the report. Do you accept this, that you were part of the reason why the president was, quote, naked? It clarifies it. The committee report I'm just reading out, and you've heard this, it's part of the reason why, in fact, I said absolutely important to get you on. He said Dr. Omane Boamah and Dr. Mrs. Dogbe were the president's undoing. The president was virtually naked with the two around him. True?
False. And let me indicate that, again, we are not discussing a report released by the NDC, but to discuss what you have read. How does scrapping of a biometric register justify the position that you have just articulated?
I don't have an answer to that, do you?
Thank you very much.
Do you have an answer to that?
Thank you very much.
Do you think there has any relationship?
There is a very strong positive correlation. Thank you.
Can you please explain the correlation?
Fortunately for me, I've had the opportunity to respond to aspects of what you claim to be the report of the Constitutional Committee's work. I am just of the view that having stated this, my job is done.
So those are excerpts of the interview Evans Mensah had with Dr.Omane Boamah on Top Story a while ago. But let's get on to Skype and speak with Dr. Kobe Mensah, who is also a political communication marketer, and he will also be helping us understand some of the issues raised by this committee. Good evening to you, Doc. You're very welcome on PM Express.
Hi, good evening. And
Doc, according to this report we're all looking at, there was a disconnect between the media party and the government communication machinery. How dangerous was this, and to what extent, from where you sit, did this affect the fortunes of the party?
thank you. Well, certainly we know that during the elections, election campaigns, there were quite a lot of media-related issues, from the presidency and obviously from within the party broadly. Now, if I take our minds back to the elections, there was the issue of Dogbe seizing a journalist. Now, I remember that particular issue gained a lot of media traction. Quite a number of media personalities, quite a number of civil society actually petitioned the presidency to do something about this. I think that was ignored. Obviously, we had the issue with the Muntie 3, which also attracted quite a number of media, publicity. Again, the party stance was very much, behind the Muntie 3 when the entire, country, especially the media, majority of the media, was against, the position of the Muntie 3. Now, and many other issues, that are actually related to media. When it comes to the relationship with the media, or when it comes to, campaigning itself, the party has two, things to do. One is the content, i.e., what do you put inside or into the media? And then two is the structure. We're looking at the relationship that the party has with the media. And don't forget, the media has 5 key roles or 5 key functions that they perform, during electioneering. 1, they're supposed to inform. 2, they're supposed to educate. 3, they're supposed to provide a platform for what we call public opinion. 4, they're supposed to also, provide publicity. And then, of course, they're supposed to play an advocacy role. Now, all these functions, the media has to play it for both, parties, or for every, political, competitor, during elections. Now, if you do not have, that very good relationship with the media, definitely you're going to have either, 1, not educating the public very well enough on your policies, or 2, trying to, shun, your party or your policies from the publicity that they're supposed to actually grant you, or any other of these functions that they're supposed to provide. So the media is very critical in terms of the relationship with the party, during electioneering. And I think that quite a number of issues that the party had and the presidency had, in the media, with the media, really contributed to their fate in the elections.
It's still fresh in our minds how the former president in the last days to the 2016 elections accused the media of peddling falsehood in the reportage of corruption issues. And indeed, he says they deliberately distorted corruption issues at the expense of the country's dignity and international image. Indeed, this report points clearly to how the media was ill-treated by the president's in-house communication team, and how they were very economical with information released to the media. Very important. Are you surprised about this revelation, and will there have been any difference if, for instance, the media was treated fairly and information was made readily available to them?
Correct. Well, I'm not sure whether the presidency was able to substantiate, the allegation that the media, contributed, or the media basically lied, about the country's position in terms of, corruption and in terms of its finances. Obviously, I think the narrative was that, the country was not in good position in terms of corruption in terms of debt, the country's ratio, debt to GDP ratio, and other questions that particularly came from the MPP campaign, especially led by Dr. Boamah, who is the vice president now. I think those questions that was actually put forward to the NDC, the party failed to answer that appropriately, and as a result, the media landscape actually tended to follow the narrative from the MPP side of the discussions or the debate, and that is very much what I think the president at the time was actually referring to. With all due respect, I don't think that they were able to respond appropriately in terms of substantiating the allegations that the media was actually sort of quoting or creating lies to the disadvantage of the NDC. I suppose what was evident was that the party, apart from kind of towing to the lines of its own media mouthpieces, that is the very media that we know that they are very, very far towards the NDC side, there was no kind of cohesion, or there was no kind of a proper relationship between the entire media scape and the NDC party. It was very patchy, and at times it was very adversarial. And I think that is really what actually caused the media to sort of buy into the narrative of the MPP as opposed to the narrative of the NDC. Now the point is whether the country's debt to GDP ratio or the corruption allegations that was actually pushed by the MPP, whether it was true or not, obviously none of them could actually substantiate. But during political electioneering times or during campaigning times, there is very much space for reasoning. Quite a lot of things are actually rhetoric, and people find it difficult to actually substantiate that. And then, of course, if you don't have a very good media machinery that you can actually quote a very good relationship with the media, then, of course, your opposing party is what the media is going to run with. That's exactly what actually transpired.
Hold, Doc, and come back to the studio, and a lot more revelations here. Kofi Adams and Kofi Potofie were pointed out to be beneficiaries of presidential machinations, but I think we should go to where it talks about internal sabotage, lack of well-crafted message, diversion of party finances. Evans, how does the report put this?
Yeah, so this essentially had to do with the party's biometric registration and the elections that were had in terms of the primaries. Now, the committee's conclusion was that the process of registering new members onto the register, which then became a basis for the primaries, for the election of presidential and parliamentary aspirants, was so flawed that, one, it allowed infiltration, two, people were manipulating the process so that their preferred candidates, particularly executives, preferred candidates will win, but also there was so much division within the party such that the voices of people who were key were sidelined. Now, because of that discontent, the report concludes that there were key party stalwarts, activists, who felt so angry and disenchanted that they rather preferred to sabotage the party's campaign going into the 2016 elections than sit for the party to win. Right. That is how bad it was, that people were so angry that they were ready to instigate and work within the party for the party to lose.
And if you look at the Volta region, for instance, it's not like people voted against the NDC, but they simply did not vote.
For example, they mentioned a place, they mentioned a particular place like Nandom, and no, Nandom used to be a very strong seat for the NDC because Dr. Benjamin Kumbo used to be the MP there.
Right.
They lost that seat. Ambrose there is currently the MP for that particular area. And one of the reasons why they did is because of the way party executives, according to the report, had managed the process of the primaries, but also preferring that their members, their preferred candidates, go in there. Listen to this part of the report. It says, it would seem that whilst the party appeared on the surface to be united in the run-up to the election, it was in fact deeply divided in a good number of constituencies across the country, 2 years of the general elections. Right. And remember, 2 years of general elections, that's when the MPP had its internal squabbles with with Paula Foko and Kwabena Dupont. The NDC then was focusing on how the MPP seems to be struggling, but the report is telling us it appeared that they were more divided at the grassroots
than the
MPP.
And we saw the former President Rawlings
make that same point. In fact,
now
since we have Kobe Mensah on the line, there's a part of this report that talks about messaging. Okay, and it's interesting. This part of the report, it says the party's messaging unduly focused on infrastructure, and even then failed to fully explain the social benefits that were associated with expanding infrastructure. It goes ahead to say, not surprisingly, the party was accused of lacking a message that resonated with the people, given their worsening living conditions. To put it bluntly, what the report is saying is there was a disconnect between what the party was trying to sell to us, which is that we're investing so much in infrastructure. And remember that one before the campaign, that was the NDC's biggest unique selling proposition, which is that we have, in fact, the word they used was invested in terms of infrastructure investment. It is unprecedented.
It's unprecedented.
The report is saying it's good to say that, but
you need to link the benefits.
Absolutely, to how people were feeling on the ground. There was no connection there.
Let me gather gauge the mood of Dr. Kobe Mensah on this. And we talk about messages, and you know that if you say a message is not well crafted, it's very important in winning elections. You need to let the people understand what exactly you're offering them to be able to win their hearts. I mean, who would you put at the doorstep of who would you put the blame at, and how did even this go against the NDC?
If we look at the message, example, when we talk about messaging, now we look at how does the party craft overarching campaign message, which in this case, the NDC's case, they say transforming Ghana, changing lives, for example. Now, how does that also connect to what we call the narrowcast messages, i.e., when you take health, how does that connect to health? When you take, let's say, economy, how does that connect to economy? When you take education, how does that connect to education? Now, I agree with the report that the NDC's message was overly dependent on the infrastructure question, which over and over again, they failed to connect the very basis of people's livelihood, i.e. health, education, economy, etc. So I think that, yes, a very large extent where the MPP was actually talking about the economic issues, talking about education, what they would do, talking about healthcare, what they would do, the NDC was overly dependent on the infrastructure, and they failed to connect the infrastructure benefits to the people. So people largely couldn't relate to that. Now, when we say couldn't relate to that, let me give you a typical example. Well, you do, what do you call it, an overfly at Circle, for example. You do the Circle, interchange, fantastic. However, how does that actually concern somebody in Takoradi, for example? You've got to actually connect the dots and let them see the benefits in that. However, if you take a development, infrastructure development at one geographical location, and you're actually doing a national campaign and you beam that up to those who are not within the immediate catchment, of where that particular infrastructure is, then of course, you're actually telling them that essentially they don't matter. And I think that is what the party failed to do, to connect the dots for people to see the relevance and the connectedness of these infrastructure, of these development to their very lives in their very communities. And then again, let me say that there was also the feeling that the party, did it so much, very right down to the campaign before some of these infrastructure development were carried out. Take, Kotokraba, for example. In fact, Kotokraba barely was opened, I think, a week or so to the elections. Then the question is, for how long did you wait until the elections before you actually did that? Does it mean that you did it just because of elections again, that particular speed dating, I think, failed to connect, with the people. So yes, the infrastructure was overbearing, but it also lacked connectivity to the very basis of people's lives. And I think that's also another reasons why it cost the party the vote. The message
another important point captured in this report is how angry the the supporters at the grassroots level were. We heard about some of these unfortunate allegations in various parts of the country, and even in the strongholds of the NDC, that monies and goodies meant for the party people at the grassroots level never reached them. And the report confirms this. And I ask, who should we blame for this? Was it that the president himself lost touch with the people so much so that he could not even realize that the people were dissatisfied, or that the people around him were just wicked?
To me, I think the presidency must take the blame, because they run the campaign right from the center. When you have in the media, speculations or allegations about some personality in the media being given goodies, some personality who are not very much at the grassroots level being given cars, etc. Definitely you're going to have the grassroots people who think that they're actually doing the job. They're going to get them angry. So I suppose the way that the campaigning was run from the center, was actually problematic. Because when you are running such a huge machinery, especially a presidency where you have quite a number of people being fingered, you do not want to put the party, the campaigning especially, in the hands of those very people that people have actually fingered. So I suppose you could actually lay blame to the presidency the way that the campaign was run. I think that it would have been much more beneficial to the party if they had decentralized, which I suppose getting to the latter part of the party they tried to do. But if they had decentralized the campaign, making sure that communities owned their campaign, then perhaps they could have actually had a lot of grassroots people participating in that. But in this case, the campaign was very much right from the center. Resources and logistics were actually very much determined from the center. And I think that wasn't helpful.
Just on that point that he made about the grassroots, etc., the report actually captures that. The report actually said that apparently there was what they call the party campaign strategy team.
Okay.
And the party campaign strategy team had come up with strong recommendations as to how the campaign should be run. Now, that report told that they formed that there was a the National Campaign Committee.
All right.
That executed the campaign.
Okay.
But before the National Campaign Committee was set up, the party campaign strategy team had said that make sure that your campaign is not extravagant.
Okay.
Make sure your campaign is grassroots level based.
Right.
Listen to what the committee said on the back
with
of these
regards to this.
It says, much of the campaign that unfolded, we were told, did not follow these recommendations, as the party ended up being accused of conducting an extravagant campaign. It goes on to say, the mounting of huge billboards, it was alleged, offended many voters and reinforced MPP accusations that these were funded from stolen public monies.
Okay.
It says, the NDC campaign language was generally considered unduly combative and offensive. The endless launch of regional and constituency campaigns ignored the more capillary approach recommended, which involved, and they come back to
what
Dr. Mensah's point,
right,
which involved town hall meetings, meeting of small groups, midnight and dawn visitations by the president and all candidates participating in social events at the grassroots level. On point, Dr. Mensah makes the point. In fact, this is a point that the committee says the party again missed, the campaign missed. Although there was clear recommendation that follow these laid down procedures. Go small, target small meetings, small groups, do midnight and town visitation, avoid extravagant campaigns. We all saw what happened.
We all saw it.
And people then said, I'm looking at these huge billboards. Right. In fact, there was one point, they locked down all morning shows. I remember that point. There was a point where all morning shows were bought.
Okay.
They were on the Super Morning Show. They were on the City Breakfast Show.
Everywhere.
And the committee's report says that instead of winning hearts, convince people that they are using our money, stolen monies, to run the campaign. This is according to the report, and it's very revealing.
It's very revealing, and of course, Doc points hit the nail right on the head. Let's take a break on PM Express, and then we'll still get more into it, because a lot of revelations we need to deal with on PM Express. If you just joined us, we're still discussing the 65-paged Professor Kwesi Botwe report that's supposed to find out what led to the loss of the NDC in the 2016 presidential elections. We'll be back after this break. This is PM Express. We're discussing the 65-paged executive summary report of the Professor Kwesi Botwe committee that's supposed to investigate the defeat of the NDC in the 2016 general elections. And I have with me in the studio JoyNews editor Evans Mensah, and on Skype is Dr. Kobe Mensah. He is a communication marketing analyst, and we've been having some very interesting mind-boggling discussions on the issues raised by this report. Now, earlier on, you mentioned some of the things that were captured in this report, Evans, and one of it is that Kofi Adams, who is the national organizer, and Kofi Potofie, chairman of the party, were beneficiaries of presidency machinations. How did the report explain this, and how did it affect the defeat of the NDC in 2016? Well,
this is part of the views they collected from what they describe as a large segment of pro-NDC press, and that they had indicated that they believed Kofi Adams and Mr. Potofie benefited from the president's machinations in the Kumasi Congress, and I was at that Congress, and this was the Congress that affirmed. This was just before the 2012 elections, if I'm not mistaken. No, right after that, and it essentially elected the party's leadership, the new leadership. That's when Kofi Adams was elected as a national organizer. That's when Kofi Potofie was elected as a national chairman. That's the same event where Koko Aindoho was elected as a deputy general secretary. Now, I was at that event. Now, the argument that is been captured in the report essentially is that Mr. Kofi Adams and Mr. Kofi Potofie only won because the presidency had manipulated things in their favor. Okay. There's no evidence to suggest that happened, right, but it had been captured in the report, and so it's become an issue. Okay. It would be interesting to find out what those two individuals themselves say about this finding that has been put out. But that's as far as it says and explains as far as these two individuals are concerned.
Okay. Let me come to Dr. Kobe Mensah. I've heard so many theories that if the NDC does not take care, it will stay in opposition for long. In fact, we heard the former president, Rawlings himself, consistently cautioning the former President Mahama of babies with sharp teeth. And even recently, the ex-president commending the NPP and indicating that the NPP may stay in power for long if it continues the way it has started. But even before the 2016 elections, the president again cautioned the NDC to be careful with the way it was going about its campaign. What does this report mean to the NDC party as far as capturing back political power is concerned?
Right, thank you. Earlier I wanted to make one observation that I quite remember during the launch of the party's manifesto, I actually sounded that particular caution that because of the DKM issue, the party should rather consider not to hold, the manifesto in Sunyani because of the possibility of flamboyance. And obviously, with people being very much, in issues, with the party at the time because of the DKM issue, they were not supposed to do. But of course, it went on well over there. Obviously, amidst drumming and dancing, which I thought it was very much unfortunate. So that's one of the issues that we talked about, in terms of flamboyance, in terms of displaying opulence, at a time when people were not so happy, with the party. Now, when it comes to the party's position going forward at the moment, I think that yes, they have to be very good opposition. What I mean by being very good opposition is that they do not have to sort of attack everything that the governing party now seeks to implement. They've got to actually comment where they have to, and they've got to actually come out with superior ideas and superior solutions where they have to. Now, if you don't actually play your cards well in a position, then of course you would be in a position for quite a long time. I don't believe that the MPP can stay in power for that long, because obviously political parties, when they're in government, the burden is on them for them to prove to the electorate, and of course the electorate always become very pathetic to ruling parties, as we know. What we call the old saying that says kind of, it's escaped me a little bit, but when you become so familiar with people, you tend to grow wary and you try to peel off from them. And I'm thinking that if the NDC should actually pick itself up very well, try to listen to other ideas from other citizenry, I'm sure that they could actually formulate superior debate. They could formulate superior solutions for this country, and perhaps they could win power the next time round. But they've got to be good opposition.
Doc, the babies with sharp teeth are still in the party. You think they still can make it with these babies?
Well, for me, I disagree that they are babies with sharp teeth, because I believe that at some point in time, political parties have the responsibility to recruit leadership for this country. And for me, I still maintain that perhaps one of the benefits that Professor Mills left the NDC is by recruiting quite a young men and women into the party that could actually change the face of the party. Truly, the NDC's image had changed as a result of that drive. Now, whether they are with sharp teeth or not, I couldn't actually comment on that. But I think that it was a good thing that the NDC actually pushed forward quite a young men and women into the party. Now they actually can take the mantle going forward. I think that it's something that all political parties must give that opportunity to young people, so that we could actually fulfill that particular responsibility of recruiting and training leadership for this country. As to whether
the people who felt that it was good to recruit young people in the party, but in the situation where the young people were not seen to be conducting themselves well, was problematic.
That is when the president should start reining in on them, or the party should have reining on them. Now, I am of a particular view that we must decouple the presidency from the party. We haven't been able to do that. None of our political parties has been able to create that distinction between the party and the presidency, or the governing party, so that when some of these young people, perceived young people, trying to misbehave in court, or not actually doing what is right in the eyes of the general public, the party should be able to crack the whip. But unfortunately, we still have in our political parties a very undemocratic system, where you have the presidency or the president still being the head of the party, which I think it is very wrong. I think that we must democratize, and by democratizing, making sure that the center, i.e. the presidency or the governing party, is very much decoupled from the party, so that the party itself can run its programs, whilst its other arm in government running the government. But in this case, we have political parties in power, and the same leadership are running the party. How do you crack the whip when people are not behaving as they must do? Certainly, it wouldn't be possible. So I think that the conversation is much more broader than that. We need to look at internal democracy, and even when you look at the MPP now, there are quite a number of outstanding cases that haven't been resolved. I mean, we have the case with Cabinet Japan. Whether he's been suspended or not suspended, of course, they say that he's suspended. But for how long would he be suspended, for example? We need to talk about it. We need to talk about other pending issues, both in MPP and NDC and other political parties. making sure that our parties will be developmental oriented as opposed to being power oriented. So we need to have that conversation. And I think that it's about time for us to start having that conversation now.
And what more do we know? Do we need to know with this report?
So, of course, I mean, going forward, there are other things that, as you mentioned, this is a good summary, 65 pages. We just have touched the surface. There are issues with financing, the party's financing. What happened to the party's financing? How much did they raise? The part of it that is interesting that I'm looking forward to exploring is on election day. What happened?
What happened on election day?
What happened with monies they devoted for transportation? What happened with money devoted for logistics, mobilization, feeding, monitoring, election results collation, which is a fundamental
and I saw a point with the issue they had with the electronic system, collation system.
The biometric system.
The biometric system.
Yes, I mean, which again points to, they had indicated that the biometric system was flawed. It was manipulated by party executives so that their preferred candidates will win the internal primaries, which again was a fundamental reason, they explained, that they then began to have a lot of independent candidates who broke away, stood and caused the party to defeat in a few places. Anthony Cabo's constituency in Laura was one of the key places where they lost because they had an independent candidate who had broken up from the party. Yeah. And again, remember, just last week, the party came to the conclusion that what they need to do was to scrap the biometric register.
Exactly the point. These are very fine details that would be very interesting. I would love to know more about what happened on election day, where monies meant for transport and other things went to. But Doc, it's very important. We need to know how to move forward. So going forward, how do you recommend the party cleans up this mess?
Well, I think that it was good that the party did this particular report. And I particularly think that they should, circulate the report to the very branches of the party, recommend quite a number of, reform. One of them particularly is about financing. Party financing had been one of the biggest issues in this country. How do you let the people take ownership of the party so that they can freely, contribute, to the party's coffers, and then would be sure that the money is actually used for what it is, meant to do. I think that has to be done. And then also I think that the party has to look broadly within its structures and see how do they put structures in place. Now, when it comes to campaigning, how do you actually mobilize resources, including human resources, to actually push the campaign? I think there are quite a number of, issues that the parties, have to address. Both, the NDC, the NPP, and other political parties have to actually address. But going forward, I think the NDC has the opportunity to address a lot of anomalies that they had. And I think that if they don't do so, then it will be very, very much, regrettable. But I suppose they'll have the opportunity to regroup and then also to recruit quite other, people within the party. I mean, you don't necessarily have to, get people on the front line. Sometimes you could actually use certain brains, behind the scenes that could actually, all go well for you. So I think that they shouldn't actually see this as a very negative. I think it's a very positive, but they should really, put their act together.
Depending on how they handle the information. Well, many thanks to you, Dr. Kobi Mensah. We truly appreciate your time. Dr. Kobi Mensah is a communication marketing analyst, and he joined us via Skype. Many thanks. We truly appreciate your time on PM Express. And so from tomorrow, we will hear the other details of the 65-page executive summary of the Professor Kwesi Botwe committee set up by the NDC to investigate what led to the party's defeat. Many thanks to you, JoyNews editor Evans Mensah, who's been monitoring this report and give vivid analysis of that report. My name is Aisha Ibrahim. Many thanks for watching. Have a great evening.